Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
It might take a year and a half as demand starts to really cool down for supply to catch up.
Another interest rate hike, what it means for affordability in this province. Also,
almost random occurrence.
A fatal tree falling incident is prompting bigger concerns around an increase in weather-related crashes. And connecting the dots between a royal visit in Victoria and a Russian billionaire. An investigation into a North Saanich mansion.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. The aim is to tame inflation and cool the housing market. For the second time in 2 months, the Bank of Canada has doubled its benchmark interest rate, pushing it to 1% from 0.5%. And as the CBC's Leanne Young tells us, while the results from today's hike are yet to be seen, some say real estate sales are already slowing here in BC.
All right, so tell me about this place.
It's been 5 months since realtor Leo Wilk listed this $1 million 3-bedroom condominium just outside of downtown Vancouver, and still no bites.
We just reduced the price, and we still have good activity on it, but just haven't found the right person yet. I actually do like this exposed concrete.
After record sales last year, the realtor is now sensing a shift in Vancouver's red-hot housing market.
A home that was going to get 20 offers, not that long ago, we'll get quite a bit less, 5, 10, who knows what the number is when it comes down to.
He won't call it a buyer's market yet. Average home prices are still rising, but demand is slowing. In Toronto's once frenzied market, prices are already dipping.
We've just been in a very aggressive seller's market in the past 2 years, and so this is a big shock.
As the economy...
The jolt stems from the Bank of Canada's much-expected rate hike. The bank announced today its biggest jump in more than 2 decades, raising its benchmark rate from 0.5% to 1%.
We are committed to using our policy rate to return inflation to target, and will do so forcefully.
The bank is trying to rein in inflation. With uncertainty from the war in Ukraine straining supply chains, oil and food prices are soaring.
Inflation is at 30-year highs, so something needs to be done so that we're not paying such ridiculous prices for things.
Some experts say, though, much of the inflationary pressure is coming from outside of Canada, so increasing interest rates here won't have an immediate effect.
I think we're going to have the worst of both worlds in Canada for the rest of this year.
The central bank says the economy can weather the hikes, pointing to signs like the record low unemployment rate. For those looking to get into the housing market, the higher mortgage rates can come with upsides.
Now they're going, oh wait, I don't have to compete with 20 other people. I can do an inspection. I can have some time to do some diligence. It's actually a relief, I would say, almost.
The competition may thin out further as the Bank of Canada is signaling more hikes ahead. Leanne Young, CBC News, Vancouver.
And despite talk of a downturn in real estate, affordable housing remains out of reach for many British Columbians as prices continue to rise. The average price of a home in Greater Vancouver is $2.3 million. That's an all-time high. Changing that is a key priority in the federal government's recently released budget. But as Joel Ballard reports, some advocates say the feds are still missing the mark.
Always pricey, housing in BC has seen another spike.
We've seen through the pandemic housing prices skyrocket.
And it's not just private ownership feeling the squeeze, but also people who are renting. Atke says it's become normal to see some renters spend 50% of their annual income on their housing, forcing people to choose between a place to live and other basic necessities.
They're cutting back on groceries. They might be skipping meals. It means that they're not putting their kids in those extracurricular activities. And for some, they're at very high risk of homelessness.
Today's announcement that interest rates are going up may seem like good news for those trying to get into the market or find a more affordable place to call home. But because the supply and demand for housing in BC is so imbalanced, you won't see changes overnight.
It might take a year and a half as demand starts to really cool down for supply to catch up.
And don't expect this interest rate hike to be the last one.
They've clearly signaled they are going to keep raising rates until we see inflation start to come back to where they want it to be, which is 2%. They think that's not going to happen until about 2024.
The housing crunch isn't news to the federal government either.
We have a serious problem
in our country and a very serious problem here in BC.
Minister Freeland says the province simply doesn't have enough housing to keep up with the demand.
The budget I tabled last week represents the most ambitious plan Canada has ever put forward to solve this fundamental challenge.
The federal government pledged to double the number of new homes built in Canada over the next 10 years. New money that was welcome news to some, but advocates say it needs to go further to ensure that not just housing is built, but truly affordable and accessible housing, like nonprofits and co-ops.
We are not going to be able to turn the corner on this crisis, and we're not quite there yet under budget 2022.
A sign that housing affordability in BC remains elusive for so many. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Vancouver.
Police and city officials are looking into what weather conditions led to a tree falling on a moving car and killing one person. The crash happened yesterday evening after a day of wind and hail. As John Hernandez reports, road safety experts say weather-related vehicle crashes are a growing concern.
A lone bouquet of flowers and a pile of sawed logs, all that's left behind from the sudden and fatal crash. Nearby residents still in shock.
This is obviously a sad and shocking image. I mean, when such a almost random occurrence happens and somebody happens to be right there, right at the wrong moment, and as a result, somebody loses their life.
The tree fell around 5:15 p.m. Tuesday onto Marine Way, landing directly on top of a green Honda.
When we arrived on scene, the person in the car was clearly deceased.
Now an investigation into exactly what happened and if it could have been prevented.
And obviously, this is a very sensitive, a very tragic case, so we are working with our partners at the city and the Parks Board to determine the cause or how this tree fell.
Neither the city nor the Park Board would confirm whether the area where the tree fell from was maintained by municipal staff.
That, I'm sure, is something that the public authorities will be looking at.
This road safety expert who lives on the block says weather likely played a major role. The region was battered by severe wind and hailstorms through much of the day, the latest in a series of severe weather events that are becoming a growing concern on the road.
We are seeing a little bit more over the more recent years of collisions related to extreme weather. And obviously with the climate change happening, there's a chance that it may happen a little bit more.
Dilgear says thorough reviews of forested roadside areas like this could be in order. As for drivers, he says it's always important to take precautions when driving in adverse conditions.
And making sure that your vehicle is prepared for whenever these types of situations might occur. It's properly winterized, wipers working, decent tires, etc. It may not have prevented something like this, but it might prevent other weather-related events.
With the investigation into this crash ongoing, anyone with dashcam footage from the area is asked to contact police. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
And some startling footage out of Delta to show you now. A pickup driver caught on camera smashing into several parked vehicles. Police say the series of hit and runs happened on April 11th. Security camera footage shows what appears to be a Nissan Titan pickup truck speeding down the residential street and swiping one car before careening headfirst into another one parked in a driveway. Delta police say no one was injured in either crash. The truck was last seen traveling west on 80th Avenue from 119th. Anyone with information is asked to contact police. And charges are being laid against an armed American man arrested for allegedly crossing the border near Peace Arch. Police say U.S. citizen John Wright tried to enter Canada last month through the crossing in Surrey, where he joined a Canadian woman in a waiting cab. Border officers say they got to him quickly and they ended up seizing 3 loaded handguns and a stun gun. Wright has been charged with smuggling, possession of a restricted firearm, and failure to comply with the Immigration and Refugee Act. The BCRCMP Federal Border Unit is investigating. Well, 2 years after a 21-year-old was randomly fatally shot on his front lawn in Surrey, his killer has been sentenced. IHIT says Robert Tomaljanovic has been sentenced to 12 years less time served. He was convicted of manslaughter and robbery with a firearm in January. He was arrested less than a week after the shooting of Prithpal Singh near Bear Creek Park. And a 90-pound bronze sculpture worth around $45,000 and donated to BC Children's Hospital has been stolen. The metal artwork by local artist Marie Curie was reported missing several days ago. The sculpture was meant to create a small outdoor garden sanctuary for patients, family, and staff. But after only a few days on display outside the Oak Street entrance, it was stolen in the early hours of April 3rd.
Sad for the patients and the families and our staff that won't have the ability to enjoy this. But art plays such an integral role to the environment that we want to create, knowing that it's absolutely vital to the healing journey.
VPD have now been notified and are investigating. The hospital president is calling for the sculpture to be returned, no questions asked. In Kelowna, 2 people are facing criminal charges in relation to 2 incidents at anti-vaccine demonstrations last year. As Brady Strachan reports, those charged are lead members of a vocal group of protesters firmly against provincial health measures.
Go back to your country. You're not a Canadian. You're not a Canadian.
This is Bruce Ordzik, a notorious anti-vaccine protester in Kelowna. Last summer, while demonstrating outside a vaccine clinic, he unleashed a racially motivated rant at a security guard. The incident was reported to the RCMP, and today police announced 1 charge of causing a disturbance. Ordzik regularly attends protests against health measures and often confronts people who don't share his views, including this confrontation when he verbally harassed a CBC News team.
You are a fraud and a scam.
Last month, Ordzik was charged with 1 count of uttering threats against another journalist for an incident at another Kelowna vaccine rally. Today, police also announced a criminal charge against Linda Jackson of Kelowna for an incident at a Remembrance Day ceremony. She allegedly took over a mic during the ceremony to spread anti-vaccine messages, an action that horrified many of the veterans and families in attendance. Jackson is charged with 1 count of disturbing order or solemnity of a meeting.
I use the term crossing the line in this particular case related to Remembrance Day. Coming up and taking control of a mic as a part of a ceremony is an element of an offense in the criminal code.
Police say anti-vaccine protesters in Kelowna also have been issued numerous bylaw tickets for organizing gatherings during the pandemic. Ordzik and Jackson have their court dates later next month. Brady Strachan, CBC News, Kelowna.
It is time now to check in with our search for BC's best small town. Once again, reporter Justin McElroy's got a really tough assignment today. He's on Salt Spring Island, the beautiful Salt Spring Island. Justin, what can you tell us about the matchup between Salt Spring and Lillooet?
Yeah, we're island hopping right now. But Salt Spring versus Lillooet, 2 very different towns in BC with 2 very different vibes. And when you look at the census stats, you might think that Salt Spring would have the edge. Of course, it gets a lot more tourists than Lillooet, but it also has a much bigger population and many more people that have come to town over the last 10 years, whereas Lillooet's population has been stable. One of those people coming to Salt Spring is Kimoko Brown. She runs with her family a bed and breakfast. She lived in New York before that, worked in finance, but wanted to move somewhere with a little bit of a smaller feel and a place where everyone felt at home.
Everything closes a lot earlier. If you're going to eat out, you have to eat out, before 7 o'clock or before 8 o'clock. But the people were just amazing. 20 years ago, when my parents first got here, we called it the drawbridge. Where we're here now, and so we want to keep it this way and keep it small, and we don't want other people to come. But I don't know. I'm seeing less of that, to be honest, and we felt welcomed when we moved here.
Of course, there are plenty of people on these islands that want less growth, want limited population. There is a huge affordable housing crisis as well, because so many people do want to move here, but plenty of people feel loved and coming here every year, just like Kimoko.
Yeah, it's a popular destination for sure. So which town has the lead in voting so far today?
Well, in actuality, despite that population lead for Salt Spring, it is Lillooet right now with the narrow victory, or at least they're up right now. The Fraser Canyon town, 2,000 people, a lot of heart, a lot of history there, a beautiful Main Street winery, lots that you can do in the immediate area. But yeah, you might not think that it would beat Salt Spring today, but there's always a Cinderella story in these sorts of competitions where a town rallies around itself and propels itself through. We'll see if it makes it through for the semifinal. We'll see ultimately one of these two towns, one of the final four in the search for BC's best.
Yeah, we'll be watching closely tonight, Justin. Thank you.
Thanks, Anita.
Johanna's off today. Amy Bell joins us now with the forecast. And Amy, I don't know if you've seen Justin yesterday, the past few days, but he's really lucked out on this trip so far. He's had some pretty spectacular weather.
He has. He has missed a lot of the madness that we've seen in other areas. So generally a calmer day right across the board for everybody. We've seen a few scattered showers early this morning and then again this afternoon, really just a few little drops here and there. But definitely after yesterday's chaos, we'll take it. And we are going to see much more pleasant weather heading our way over the next several days. It's still trending on the cool side, though, for the next couple of days, especially in those overnight hours. We'll drop down once again near zero tonight. And in fact, for the next couple of evenings, it will be very chilly. And that means we have that risk of some frost or even some freezing or even some wet flurries at those very higher elevations when we do have a risk of some afternoon showers coming in. However, for the most part, we are trending towards much brighter and sunnier weather, and that's pretty much across the province. That's great news for any holiday weekend travel, as that means the highways and those mountain passes will be in much better shape. Tomorrow, we'll just get up to 10 degrees, and then again, dropping down to zero overnight. Same story for Friday. Saturday, we'll see a little bit more cloud, but staying dry until the evening. Sunday, we do have a chance of some showers, so you may want to get out there on Saturday and plant those eggs.
Well, I like that you've kept it just to those three icons for now.
I'll get into the rest of it.
Yeah, well, for now, this is great. Thanks, Amy. Back in 2020, Harry and Meghan chose a Victoria mansion for their home base in Canada. While long gone, questions remain about their short stay. After the break, how that property is connected to a Russian billionaire. Thanks for joining us on our commercial-free live stream. Well, increasing supply is one tactic for tackling the housing crunch, but ensuring affordability is a more complex problem. That's because the definition of what is affordable varies widely, depending on who's doing the math. Lauren Bird has this look at what affordable really means.
The term affordable housing is being used a lot these days, and how it's being used can be a little confusing. What's considered affordable for some is not for others. The city of Fredericton recently announced that a portion of the new residential building projects at the NBX redevelopment would be considered affordable. But those units have rent costing just 10% below market rates.
I too have a bit of a concern about the affordable housing being 20% affordable at 10% below market, and the multitude of definitions of affordable housing. And I struggle with that myself, because when is it affordable, when is it not?
Good question. According to the definition used by the province and the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, for housing to be considered affordable, it shouldn't cost more than 30% of a household's before tax income. But when it comes to programming and policy and developing affordable housing, that changes, and the median income in the area is used to measure what's affordable. In Fredericton, that means rents at about $1,500 a month are technically affordable. But that's still out of reach for a lot of people.
It's considered affordable by, these funder policy developer standards, but that doesn't translate to the actual household experience of affordability and being at that 30% or below of your income on housing costs.
So what's the solution? For starters, Woodhull Melnick says we need to use language to start differentiating between affordable housing and below market rate housing. Those terms just aren't synonymous.
a mystery involving a lavish mansion on Vancouver Island, the royal family, and a well-connected Russian billionaire. Tonight, an investigation into Canada's loose and murky ownership laws that can serve to conceal the wealth of the ultra-rich. Frederick Zalak of Radio-Canada's Enquête, in partnership with the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, unravels the threads around Meghan and Harry's stay here in BC.
On Vancouver Island, just north of Victoria, there's a spectacular waterfront mansion that attracted a lot of attention a couple of years ago because a very famous couple was staying there. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle chose to live in this lavish $18 million mansion for a few months with baby Archie when they quit their royal duties.
I saw the car go by. I believe Meghan was in it.
Neighbors caught glimpses of the couple, but behind those closed gates remained a mystery. Who was the wealthy owner of the mansion? With Canada's notoriously weak landowner and corporate registries and lax transparency laws, the real owners are often impossible to track, making our country very attractive for those who wish to hide assets. According to rumors around town, the mystery owner was a Russian billionaire.
Everybody was talking about it and saying, oh, it's Yuri Milner, and so that's what we heard.
Yep.
And that rumor's never gone away.
We have one last announcement this evening.
Yuri Milner is a Russian billionaire who made it big in Silicon Valley. He became a large shareholder of Facebook and Twitter before the tech giants went public.
Please welcome one of the founders of the Breakthrough Prize, Yuri Milner.
Milner founded annual awards where he joined A-list Hollywood actors and pop stars to present prizes to worthy scientists.
In every cell of our bodies, the history of humanity is written in DNA.
He owns this $100 million French-style chateau in Silicon Valley. It's been reported that he also owns this 350-foot mega yacht, the Andromeda, but he has publicly denied it. Milner is not in the immediate circle of powerful oligarchs around Putin, but the New York Times and the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists revealed a few years ago that he received millions from the Kremlin to invest in Twitter through VTB, a state-owned bank. Some of his funds invested in Facebook came from Gazprom, the state-owned Russian energy giant, and went through Alisher Usmanov, a powerful oligarch who's now sanctioned by Canada and other countries. Milner now says that he hasn't received Russian funds since 2011.
He's a Russian investor who is making investments in the U.S. with the funding of a very significant oligarch in Russia and a very significant, politically significant Russian state-owned bank.
Well, it's extremely close to the Kremlin. It's government-owned, and it's actually sanctioned at the moment because it's government-owned and because it's such a kind of, what would you call it, a slush fund for the government.
So did Milner buy the Vancouver Island estate? When we first reached out to him, he stated that neither he nor any family member nor any entity affiliated with him or his family owns Millefleur Mansion on Vancouver Island, labeling claims of his ownership as inaccurate media assertions. Public documents provide no information about who bought this property, but we managed to track it down because of the Pandora Papers leak of confidential offshore documents. The mansion is controlled by a shell company registered in the British Virgin Islands, JEMC Management Limited, which is in turn owned by a Bahamian company, ultimately owned by an offshore trust, a trust now named Andromeda, but formerly known as the Yuri Milner Trust.
If it all goes back to a trust that's called the Yuri Milner Trust, that's a pretty big giveaway.
According to one of the leaked documents, Yuri Milner exercised control over a series of companies, including JEMC Management, the company linked to the mansion. We showed the documents to Pat Poitvin, a retired RCMP investigator and founder of the Canadian Centre of Excellence for Anti-Corruption.
If the data on those documents are real, it shows that Mr. Milner has ultimate control over this property. has created multiple layers of companies to hide the ultimate beneficiary owner of this property. And why do we need to structure and have a strategy of so many layers to hide this?
We went back to Milner with the findings of our investigation, and this time we got a different answer. Milner now admits that the Yuri Milner Trust, which was funded by him, did purchase the Vancouver Island mansion in 2013. However, he says he and his wife were later removed from the list of beneficiaries and replaced by unnamed charitable foundations. He claims that he's neither controlling nor benefiting from the trust, including the Canadian mansion. And what about the Andromeda mega yacht? In his response, Milner admits for the first time that a trust he established bought the yacht, but claims neither he nor his family are beneficiaries or affiliated with its assets.
Ownership doesn't really matter. If you have the exclusive use of something, you basically have all the benefits of owning it without having to be legally owning it. So yes, he may not be the owner, but he may very well be the ultimate beneficiary, which is basically the same thing for all this stuff.
With the war raging in Ukraine, the federal government has announced it is speeding up the process to set up a publicly accessible registry of beneficial owners of federally incorporated companies by the end of next year. But real estate and land titles registries are controlled by the provinces. The federal finance minister hopes provincial governments will join the effort for transparency.
I'm not sure who wants to get up and say, I'm in favor of opacity when it comes to ownership in Canada. This is an issue where I really hope and believe there is a real national consensus we have to get it done.
Will Canada shed its reputation of being a haven for those who wish to stay in the shadows? Up to now, most governments have done little to really address this problem, but many now believe we are at a turning point to lift this veil of secrecy. Frédéric Zalac, CBC News, Vancouver.
And reporter behind the piece, Frédéric Zalac, joins me now. Now, Frédéric, you speak about how the rules really need to be managed by the provinces. How does BC fare when it comes to real estate ownership?
Well, actually, BC is a bit ahead of the curve if you compare to all the other provinces, because we are the only jurisdiction in Canada that has a new registry that's supposed to reveal who are the beneficial owners of real estate in this province. So that has been set up. The deadline, I mean, we looked into it for Mr. Milner, didn't find his name in there, but the deadline has been extended because of COVID. So for submitting information, it could go until November. The one big problem, though, with the registry here in BC is that there is no verification at all of the information that is submitted. If you want to go and have a library card, for example, you need to show your driver's license, which is not the case. There's no verification for this important new registry about the identity of who are those beneficial owners. So that is a big problem, and it costs money, of course, to verify that information. The hope is that now that the federal government has announced a new federal registry for corporate federally incorporated companies that would reveal beneficial ownership, that they could provide that service maybe to the provinces like BC, so that the cost of verifying the information could be basically the federal government could take care of that and do it for all provinces. That's been a proposal now.
Fascinating stuff. Frédéric Zalac, thank you.
My pleasure.
Intense shelling continues in Ukraine's south and east as Russian forces try to take more territory. After weeks of heavy fighting, the United Nations says thousands of Ukrainian civilians have been injured in the invasion. Katie Simpson spent time there today in the largest trauma hospital in western Ukraine, speaking with some of those who have been hurt, and a warning: the images and stories are graphic.
Olga is optimistic she will get the vision back in her right eye. She was badly injured in a car crash while fleeing her home in Kharkiv with her 10-year-old son in the back seat. After enduring a month of heavy shelling, she was exhausted and fell asleep behind the wheel. We were sleeping in shifts, she says, trading with her husband. If both were asleep at the same time, they feared they wouldn't make it to the basement during an attack. She is angry and wants Russia to be stopped, demanding the atrocities end. People of Ukraine do not deserve this. No one else in the world deserves this, she says, calling Russian forces monsters. Because Russia has bombed more than 200 medical facilities, including a maternity ward, we agreed not to share specifics about the location of the hospital we visited, only to say it is full to capacity. Most of the injuries are from gunshots and shrapnel wounds. 80% of the patients here are civilians injured by Russian forces.
These forces, they have no humanity.
This surgeon says the physical wounds tend to heal quickly. It's the psychological damage he's worried about most.
We heard every personal story of the patient. Now they have no homes, they have no parents, children, and this is very difficult.
Victor is from the Donbass region. He lost most of his left hand when he was hit by shrapnel. I was leaving a shop heading to my house with a grocery bag, he says, when he saw a plane and the bombing started. He tried to take cover. He survived, but as he ran for help, he saw the lifeless body of a man he'd been shopping with moments before. Victor is adapting to having just one functioning hand. He, too, is angry the invasion continues. I want it to end as soon as possible because it is very scary, he says. The worst thing is the kids. Kids are dying. Adults have already lived their lives. I feel sorry for the kids.
Western Ukraine has taken in patients and tens of thousands of evacuees. There had been hope that all of this would just be temporary. But as the war grinds on, that hope begins to fade. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Lviv.
An arrest has been made in connection with yesterday's mass shooting on the New York City subway system.
Frank Robert James was stopped on the street and arrested by members of the New York City Police Department. Officers, in response to a Crime Stoppers tip, stopped Mr. James at 1:42 p.m. at the corner of St. Mark's Place and First Avenue in Manhattan. He was taken into custody without incident.
62-year-old Frank James had been at large for about 30 hours and the subject of an intense police search. He's now facing terrorism-related charges. During yesterday's morning commute, a man released smoke bombs inside a subway car in Brooklyn, then began shooting. He fired 33 times, hitting 10 people in the train and on the platform. More than 20 people were hurt in the attack. No one was killed. Back in this country, key information released today about what led to the death of a gunman at the center of a mass killing in Nova Scotia 2 years ago. Details from police suggest it was their gunshots that killed him just as he was attempting to kill himself. Blair Rhodes reports, and a warning: this story contains disturbing details and profanity.
Gina Goulet's Mazda was low on gas, and the gunman was looking for a place to fill up. His first choice was a Petro-Canada in Elmsdale, but with an emergency response team vehicle parked at the pump right next to his, he opted to leave without getting fuel. He continued up Highway 102 to the Enfield exit and the huge gas station, the Irving Big Stop. It was here his luck would run out. Seconds after he pulled up to a pump, a police SUV pulled up to the one right next to it. The driver was RCMP Constable Craig Hubley. He can be seen on gas station security video, getting out of the driver's seat. He looks across at the stolen Mazda, then draws his handgun. According to a statement he gave investigators, Hubley says he shouted a warning to his passenger, Constable Ben McLeod, who had also gotten out of the SUV and taken up a position with his carbine. McLeod also got on the radio, calling for help.
Break. Enfield Big Stop, Enfield Big Stop. Come on me, get to me. Use your cover, back up, back up. Use your cover, no rush here now. Take comms, I don't know what I'm doing.
The video shows the passenger window of the Mazda exploding. Hubley and McLeod peppered the car with more than 20 bullets. The confrontation lasted just seconds. Other police were converging on the gas station and calling for updates.
Kilo 5 and Hotel 5, Pump 6, Enfield Big Stop. Suspect is down in his vehicle, multiple shots away. HRP Earth is with us.
At some point during the confrontation, the gunman managed to shoot himself in the head. The province's chief medical examiner says that wound might have eventually proven fatal, but
a group of gunshot wounds that were inflicted by police that day are of probably greater importance, both in immediacy and the certainty with which they killed the perpetrator.
Hubley and McLeod stood guard until other officers approached the Mazda, removed the gunman, and confirmed that he was dead. Blair Rhodes, CBC News, Halifax.
Vaccine mandates at businesses are widespread, and those opposed said they would legally challenge the rules. Why their efforts to overturn things have failed so far. What's next?
Not long ago, it would have been hard to imagine. A little-known governor in Arkansas named Bill Clinton and a political maverick in Russia named Boris Yeltsin, with the eyes of the world upon them, perhaps even the fate of the world in their hands. But that's exactly what's happening in Vancouver. Clinton and Yeltsin, now Presidents Clinton and Yeltsin, are holding their first summit meeting as we speak. With a story of what's happened so far, here's our chief political correspondent, Joe Schlesinger.
The pomp was the same. First the man from Moscow, then the same for the man from Washington. But it wasn't the same. The carefully built symbols of equality of Cold War summits could not hide the fact that their roles had changed, that Bill Clinton is the man with the money, and Boris Yeltsin, the man who needs it.
Россия, которая проводит свои реформы.
Yeltsin made it clear that for him, Western help is a matter of survival.
The communists want to take revenge, to take us back to the past.
But where before coming here, he had complained he was not getting enough help, now he admitted that politically he can't afford getting too much.
The opposition is going to say in that case that we are going to be enshackled by the West.
What was needed, he said, was enough to keep reform afloat and the communists out of power. Bill Clinton expressed two concerns.
One is that any aid itself might not be well spent. The other is that future political events might undermine the impact of the aid.
After their rainy welcome, when the two leaders finally met, Vancouver's weather smiled on them.
Boris, would you like to come along?
Prime Minister Mulroney took them for a warm-up walk and then left them on their own amid the beauties of the tip of Point Grey. And while they talked of money, they also took time out to meet people, 200 school children. An encounter with a street crowd sent their security people scrambling.
Stay back. Just get it. Just get it. Back up.
Prime Minister Mulroney had this summation of his encounter with the two leaders.
Very well, he expressed his great pleasure at Canada's decisions so far and our contributions, and he and President Clinton seem to be getting along like a house of fire.
In the end, this summit is not just about money. It's about trying to convince people, convincing Americans and others in the West that the money is worth spending in their own interest, and convincing Russians that it will not make them hostage to the wiles and the will of the West. Joe Schlesinger, CBC News, Vancouver.
The U.S. Center for Disease Control has extended its mask mandate on planes and trains, citing the country's rising number of COVID cases. The mandate was set to end on April 18th, but has now been extended 15 days. The move comes as U.S. airlines call on the government to remove the mask mandate and stop pre-departure testing for international travel. Transport Canada regulations, meanwhile, state masks are required for those traveling through Canadian airports as well as on board the aircraft. Well, in this province, masks are now optional. And in the past week, BC's vaccine passport also gone. But it's a different story for workplaces. Now, an employer's right to impose mandates is being tested. And to explain what this means, Jason Proctor joins us now to walk us through a BC Labour Relations Board decision. Jason, what can you tell us?
Well, so the company involved here is BC Hydro, which, as you can imagine, Anita, is one of the province's biggest crown corporations. They employ about 6,600 employees. They brought in a vaccine mandate for employees last fall. One of the unions that represents about a third of the workers at BC Hydro, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, about 44 of their members have been placed on indefinite leave because they haven't complied with that vaccination mandate. And so the union grieved the mandate itself, and that ended up before a labor arbitrator. And so we have this decision that actually ultimately upholds BC Hydro's right to mandate that its employees be vaccinated.
Okay, so how did Hydro justify the decision in the first place when it was made?
Well, so there's a number of things. One is that some employees at BC Hydro actually asked the company to ensure that they were safe from the possibility of getting ill through other employees. Then clients like hospitals, First Nations, even helicopter pilots flying workers to work sites insisted that the employees that they were dealing with be vaccinated. There's also the toll that COVID-19 has taken on BC Hydro, which came out through this decision. There's a contractor who died, a couple of spouses of employees have died, some people have long COVID, there's been outbreaks at various work sites. And so at the end of the day, the arbitrator looks at all of this, weighs the interests of those individual employees who have given up a lot in terms of their pay and their position at this point, not to be vaccinated, and yet finds that ultimately the situation weighs on BC Hydro's right to make sure that the rest of its workforce are safe and that they operate in a way that they say is exemplary for British Columbians.
Jason Proctor, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, millions of Canadians can't find a family doctor, and the shortage is only expected to get worse. As Rowan Kennedy reports, in Quebec, almost 1 million people are on wait lists as a rising number of family doctors retire, while those still working are exhausted.
Been there, done that, have the T-shirt.
Dr. Pearl Feldman is a retired family doctor. Now she's teaching new ones.
We've been working like dogs through the pandemic, and most of us are really tired.
Feldman says current expectations on family doctors are unrealistic, and it doesn't surprise her that more and more are retiring. According to RAMQ, Quebec's Health Insurance Board, in 2017, 145 family doctors announced they planned to retire in the next 2 years. Last year, that number was 275.
And if you can't delegate it, at some point you're just going to burn out and just give up.
With almost 1 million people still on the wait list for a family doctor, this 31-year-old physician says with 1,000 patients, he's already stretched thin.
But there's just so many things that we can do with 2 arms and 2 legs. And at the end of the day, if we try to rush it all, it kind of feels like we're being pressured to deliver like fast food medicine.
Quebec's Federation of General Practitioners says that the province urgently needs 1,000 more family doctors. The Ministry of Health says that admissions to medical schools are up, though, and it hopes a new plan to give nurse practitioners, pharmacists, and paramedics more power to treat patients will lessen the strain on family doctors. Tran says that's not enough.
We have to make family medicine something that's more, that people should be proud to do.
He says more needs to be done to attract workers from outside of the country. Rowan Kennedy, CBC News, Montreal.
Well, things might be a little chilly for April here in BC. Well, we probably have no right to complain. Think of Winnipeg, a city being lashed by an early spring snowstorm. We take you there next. And at 8:44, a live look tonight at Kamloops, a beautiful shot of the river. I love it there in Kamloops. Mixed skies for that city. Amy has a look at your full BC forecast coming up.
In the year 2050, how will BC look? From agriculture to cities, how will climate change change life? Don't miss 2050 Degrees of Change, a CBC Vancouver original podcast, now available.
A spring blizzard is slamming southern Manitoba and parts of southeastern Saskatchewan with heavy snow and strong winds. As Cameron McIntosh reports, it's the flooding that could follow that has people really worried.
As forecast, the snow is coming down here in Winnipeg, across southern Manitoba, into southeastern Saskatchewan and parts of northwestern Ontario. Now, to put this into perspective, early this morning, this snow wasn't here. This has all fallen in the mid to late morning hours and into the early afternoon. Forecasters expect between 50 and 80 centimeters could fall by Friday morning. They're calling that a historic spring storm for the prairies, and even in a place that's used to winter, that much snow that fast can present problems, especially this time of year. Chief among them, just getting around. It's already hard to drive around in the city, and rural areas are seeing highways shut down, even though there have already been some accidents. Also, people are being told to stay home. Schools have been preemptively canceled, and people are being advised to stock up on supplies.
I think it's something that Manitobans are used to. We have random snowstorms, so it's nothing surprising.
What are you gonna do about it? It's here, it's gonna be for a while. Let's live with it.
It's not just that they might be having a hard time getting in and out over the next couple of days. There are also concerns that this heavy wet snow can cause problems like downed power lines and hydro outages. Also, a big concern here with all this snow this late is spring runoff. This winter was already abnormally wet on the prairies. Now, adding all this moisture into the equation could present a problem for flooding. Here in Winnipeg, the Red River is already up to the top of its banks in some places, although flood forecasters are saying that this snow should stay cold enough, long enough, that it won't melt out very quickly, that it won't present a major flooding threat in the weeks to come. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
It just feels like one thing after another when it comes to the weather in this country, Amy.
It's been a rough ride, that's for sure. But certainly we'll be keeping an eye on that situation over the next couple of days. Nothing that dramatic here, even though yesterday we did have our own fair share of West Coast drama, lots of hail, thunder, but today really settled down. And we saw a few spotty showers, but even seeing a bit of clearing even just now in some areas. So that's sort of what we're going to see over the next several days. Some clouds coming in overnight with chances of showers, but then for the most part, we're looking at fairly dry and bright conditions. Still seeing that cold air sitting over us, though. Gradually, it'll move along, but it's been stuck. And that's why we've seen those overnight lows down near zero and having frost in many mornings to contend with. So we'll continue to see that, but I suspect it will be closer to holiday or Easter Monday that we really start to see any significant rain falling. The trade-off, though, is by sort of the end of the weekend and early next week, we're seeing those temperatures back up into the mid-teens and certainly staying much warmer overnight. For tomorrow, we do have a chance of some unsettled weather in Tofino, so you will see some showers. Same story for Nanaimo, although early enough in the morning when it's cold at the upper levels, you could see that wet snow developing before it transitions to snow, and then you'll see some later afternoon clearing. Very unsettled in Whistler tomorrow, no surprise, but a chance of thunderstorms, especially later in the day, but you will see some sunshine. And then if you're heading out into the Fraser Valley, you're looking at temperatures around 12 degrees with a nice mix of sun and cloud. Gorgeous day up in Dease Lake. Tomorrow was 0. Lots of sunshine. Beautiful for Prince Rupert as well with sunshine. And Williams Lake looking to get some flurries. Increasing cloud throughout the day in Cranbrook, but you will stay dry and just hovering around 0. So as I mentioned earlier, for people doing any traveling for the holiday weekend, this is great news. We're not going to see those real adverse winter driving conditions if you're heading out through into the interior, especially those mountain passes. Though this time of year, things can change, and we'll keep an eye on things. But so far, for the next few days, we're looking at very lovely conditions. For the next 5 days, as I mentioned, we will see some warmer weather coming in by the end of the weekend, but that means the wet weather returns for Monday. So soak up that sunshine. It's just going to be very, very chilly in those overnight hours.
I mean, still a pretty good long weekend forecast. Can't complain.
No, we can't.
Thanks, Amy. There are painted Easter eggs, and then there are these beautiful, handcrafted, also massive works of art. The equally massive need they're trying to help. It's next.
The garbage was everywhere. Everywhere.
Francesca Ranger remembers moving back into her townhouse in Ottawa, and this is the mess she came home to. Her tenant left her house in shambles.
The bathtub was filled with peanut butter.
She had to hire a moving company to take out all the garbage to get her house back in livable condition. But all worth it. After 18 months living out of a suitcase, she wasn't homeless anymore.
Everything I've worked for and everything I've saved for, my future, just being torn away.
Ranger's tenant refused to leave her rental home, the only place she could go after selling her marital home due to a divorce. They stopped paying rent, and so the small restaurant owner had to pay all the bills while staying with family and friends, relocating every few days.
I was paying the mortgage on that home. I was paying the property taxes on that home, but I was homeless. Like, my tenant had more rights than I did.
Small landlords own 1 or 2 rental properties. Paralegals say they've seen dozens of clients become homeless due to extreme delays at the landlord-tenant board, which grants evictions. Some access shelters, live in their vehicles, couch surf, and even declare bankruptcy, all while waiting to move into their own homes, a process that should take between 1 to 3 months.
It's contrary to their own rules, I might add. We are waiting months and months for those kind of an order, which is totally unnecessary and inappropriate, in my opinion.
And small landlord advocacy groups say they've seen the toll a broken system takes on landlords.
You feel like being betrayed. And we've seen the mental issue that's affecting these landlords.
The province says it will pour $4.5 million over 3 years to reduce the backlog. Ranger will never rent again. She wants the system overhauled so it doesn't happen to anyone else.
If I go and lease a car and don't make the payments for 3 months, the car will be taken away from me. How is it possible that someone can rent a place, stop paying rent, and live in it for 18 months, a year and a half? It doesn't make sense.
Priscilla Kisan Huang, CBC News, Ottawa.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. The Surrey Board of Trade's Top 25 Under 25 Awards returns on April 20th. Celebrate Surrey's role models and get your tickets today at businessinsurrey.com. And have you had your say in the search for BC's best small town? Join us and channel your provincial pride and cast your vote weekdays at cbc.ca/bestsmalltownbc.
It's a long-standing Ukrainian tradition, painting eggs with colorful and intricate designs for Easter. This year, some artists have been given a bigger canvas for their creations. The results are on display at an Edmonton mall and will be part of the effort to help Ukrainians in need.
The design on my pisanka is the motif of the Betahenya. And the Betahenya is an ancient pagan goddess of protection and the protector of Ukrainian culture. And I chose it because I believe that it's important to recognize kind of the power of women at this time.
The marketing manager here decided that he would
have these Ukrainian Easter eggs painted by 12 different artists. And then after they're painted, they'll be auctioned off, and the proceeds will go to Ukrainian Canadian Social Services. We're going to be using them towards the Ukrainian nationals that will be coming here. I mean, there's going to be all sorts of things that we can help them out with, obviously grocery, gift cards, clothing. Basically, they're coming here with nothing, so we're going to try to help them out as much as we can with the funds that we raise. Innocent people are dying, and the ones that are getting out, we have to help them out because they're traumatized by the war, and they'll need counseling, they'll need all sorts of things happening here.
I have family back in Ukraine. I have very close relations with that family. What's happening right now is just, it's beyond words. And this was one way for me to kind of channel that energy in a productive way and be both therapeutic for myself, but also help people who are really going to need this help when they come to Canada and as they are coming to Canada right now.
Just beautiful designs and a wonderful cause for sure. Okay, switching gears a little bit, a Turkish restaurant owner has sent one of his kebabs where no kebab has gone before, to the edge of space. Take a look. The kebab was held on a tray and attached to a heat-resistant styrofoam box along with a GoPro camera. A helium balloon then carried it to a reported 30 to 40 kilometers to the edge of space. That's when the balloon burst, sending the kebab and the camera plummeting back to Earth and into the ocean. I mean, cool stuff, I guess. Not sure why send a kebab to space. I'd maybe choose a samosa, but perhaps that's my bias coming through. And with that, we end our show tonight. Thanks for being with us. Dan will be here tomorrow night at 6 to guide you through the evening's news. Good night.